Good morning. I'm just looking at something funky on this iPad. Hopefully I don't start a video without wanting to. My name's John Barrera. I'm one of the elders here at Friendship Alliance Church, the church that doesn't talk about money but keeps talking about it all morning. Okay. I'm like, man, now I got to go up there and talk about more money. So anyways, we're going to be looking at Matthew 25, but this is the last sermon in a series we've been doing as we lead up to our annual meeting, which is today at 5 o'clock as was announced, because we just wanted to get all of us on the same page as to how we approach our role at Friendship Alliance Church. How we as the elders, when we sit down and we get requests or opportunities to move in another direction or missions and those things, what are the guideposts around that? And Mike spoke, I'm over a month ago now, on having a mission mindset. And then Dave talked about the Christian Missionary Alliance Fund, the mission fund, but what we would like to do here, what we'd like us all to think like, is that we are all missionaries in our whatever we're doing. If we're going to school, whether we go to work, if we work at home, whatever we are, we're missionaries all the time. And every time the missionaries come, and Matt was just here a couple of weeks ago, I thought again, every time I see them, that they have a different outlook. You know, when they go to the market, it ain't just going to the market. It's going to develop a relationship with somebody who maybe I could share the gospel with. So there's that, and then Dan spoke about strengthening the biblical foundation. Nobody has the perfect sight on what the Bible is telling us as Christians. Nobody knows it all, sees it all, but there is a perfect truth in it, just that all of us, by our human nature, finite minds, we can't know everything there is to know about the Bible, but we want to continue to strengthen that personally and as a church in our life, because the Bible provides transformation in our lives. Its words can transform our lives. And then, because they jumped forward into those, I got the task of talking about money, or not really money, faithfully using God's provision. So God provides for us personally and as a church, and we want to faithfully use that provision. And there's a lot that goes even into the thinking about that, but I'll try and give you a feel for how we think on that today. But the first thing is always good to look at what the Bible has to say. Okay, for some reason I don't have a big one. Do I have to do something to get a big one here? No, like a big that I can slide. See, I just have a little one. Oh, it's right there. Okay. All right. So some of you may have been here last week. Some of you may not have been here last week. But I'm just going to repeat again to keep in mind, when I'm up here talking, I'm speaking in principles and examples in the Word of God. I'm not telling you what to do, all right? I'm not saying because it happened here, you got to go do that. I'm just talking about examples. Number two is, I don't know your finances, and I don't want to know your finances, and I'm not looking at your checkbook. If somebody's talking to you, the Lord might be talking to you, but it's not me. I don't know you. And then last of all, I said this, if you're offended by something I say, well, think about, why am I offended by what he said? And number two is, I was offended before you were, because I've been studying this for 2 months, and I've been offended, because the Lord will offend us and cut us when we're not where we should be. So I just wanted to say that. And we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the talents, which many of you may be familiar with. It's interesting to note that in Matthew, if you go look at Matthew 24, it's the end times And Jesus is saying when he goes away and that before he comes back, all these things are going to happen. Then at the beginning of 25, you have the parable of the 10 virgins. Remember, 5 had kept the oil and 5 did not have the oil. And then the master or the nobleman comes back for the wedding. And then comes the parable of the talents. After this, there's not another parable. This is the last parable, at least in Matthew. And then Jesus gets arrested and he goes to the cross. So let's go ahead and read this. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, and to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, and I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me the 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Dear Lord, we pray that your word will go into our hearts, give us ears to hear and hearts to hear, and become more like you, Lord, which is our goal. These types of words sometimes are hard for us to hear, but you, Lord, give us the Holy Spirit to help us and to comfort us and to guide us into all that is true. So do that this morning, Lord. Amen. So really what we're going to do here is we're just going to unpack this parable. One local commentator you may not know, Alistair Beck, always says that a parable is a worldly story with a heavenly meaning. Parables, you can get into them too much and try and make something out of every little thing. But really their primary purpose is to teach one primary thing. But you still have to look at it and say, well, what does this mean? Or what does that mean? So we'll try and unpack that a little bit this morning. So let's just start with, for it will be like a man going on a journey. So he just starts with like a story. Once upon a time, a man went on a journey. And he obviously was a rich man because he's going to give away all these talents of silver and or gold to his servants to watch over for him. So he's a man of means, and he's going to go on a journey. And he calls his servants and entrusted to him all his property. Right? Now remember, Jesus is going to go away real soon. So it wouldn't be a stretch to say that the man going away is the Lord. He's going away. They didn't understand that at the time. Matthew would have recalled it after Jesus rose from the dead and before he wrote this down, probably 20, 30, 40 years after Jesus had ascended to heaven. So to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and another 1. Now a talent, this was interesting to me, I never knew this. A talent is a measure of gold or silver, which I sort of knew. I remember when I first became a Christian and I read this, I thought a talent meant what? A talent, like a talent show talent. I didn't know it meant this, and I applied it that way. Oh, well, we all have talents. But the interesting thing is that it's a measure of silver and or gold, which would actually be worth about 1 talent would be worth somewhere around 20 years of a man's salary. So this guy's giving away a lot. He's entrusting a lot to these folks. I mean, the guy he gives 5 is getting 100 years worth of salary to manage or to watch over. The interesting thing is that over the years, through time, through 2,000 years, as this actual parable was taught in the English world, the word talent comes directly from this word. So when we think of talent shows and things like that, it comes from this word. That is the root of the word talent. You can do more study of that on your own. But he gives each according to his ability. And then he went away. And he who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. And the 2 did the same, but the third, who had received just 1 talent, went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. So you heard this term leverage. I thought, well, why should I even come and preach? Dave already gave it all away. But anyway, not really. This term of leverage is used in business a lot. As I said last week, business is like what I do. I'm not a pastor like in the sense of a regular pastor. But leverage is really the term of taking a small thing that you have and using leverage to get something bigger for it. And in business, this is a common thing. This is what business people do. Greedy people do. This is the way they think. They think totally in terms of leverage and how they can take this little thing and limit the risk, because the risk is the part, and get something more out of it. That's what business greedy people do. And everybody does it. You do it as well. I gave the example last week. If you walk in to buy a car and you're going to pay cash, you're going to leverage the fact that you're paying with cash to get a better deal on that car. It's a little bit of a funky concept, but I'm going to give you a real life example, just real quick, that was from my own life. When I grew up here in Manaway, we didn't have money, to say the least. And my parents were divorced. My mom was a single mom with 5 kids. We had a house, and the house was a pretty big burden to maintain and keep for a single mom my mom never in her entire life made more than $10 an hour. And, but over the years, somewhere in there, because I was a kid, I didn't really know, she paid off the house. And during that time, if you live around here, you know that house values went up a lot. So what she paid, $30,000 for the house, it was worth $200,000 later on, 20 years later. So my mom, who never made more than $10 an hour, but she had a regular job working at Hattie Larlam's, she had very good credit because she always paid her bills, and she had this house that she owned. Now, a lot of people would have just said, oh, it's good, I own my house. I own my house, and that's good enough. Well, she, for whatever reason, remember this is worldly, didn't think like that. She thought, well, I'm going to leverage this house, and I'm going to go buy another house. So her and her new husband, her remarried husband, they went out looking for deals on houses. And they were, if you're asking 70, they're going to offer you 45. And 100 people are going to tell them no, but one person's going to say, okay, I need the money, and they're going to sell. So they would buy a house, they would put a little money into it, and then they would rent it out. And once she could show the rental income along with her normal income, that was good with the bank, and then she'd do it again. So that my mom, when she passed away, she owned 6 houses and 3 unimproved properties. And she never made more than 10, and she still owned her house. So my point is she leveraged what she had to get more, and that's what the term leverage is really all about. And business people do it way bigger than that. Warren Buffett, he's the master. He leverages all the money he has to get more money. So going back to this, how do you think that this guy who had 5, right? He gave 5 talents, 100 years worth of salaries. He went out and he traded with them, and he made 5 more. So he had 100% return on investment, right? He got 5, he made 5 more. How did he do that? Did he just hope? Was there any risk? Did he just sit? Say, well, I hope I can make 5 more. No, it says he went right out immediately and began to trade. And we don't know it doesn't tell us what that was, and it doesn't matter what that was. What matters was he knew that his master was gone, and he knew who his master was, and he knew he was going to have to give an account when he came back. And so he went out and traded. He went to the next town and bought a goat for 5 whatever and brought it into Jerusalem and sold it for 10. I don't know, but whatever he did. But it didn't just happen. And when the master did return, he says to him, Master, you gave me 5. Look, I made 5 more. Isn't that good? And the master says, good and faithful servant. These guys were most likely like bond servants. They were, for all intents and purposes, slaves. If you had no money, you indentured yourself to somebody so that you had a place to live. They fed you, and you worked for them, but you didn't really get paid. He says, good and faithful servant, and then he says, enter into the joy of your master. You've made your master happy. And then the other guy comes, and he says, look, you gave me 2, and I made 2 more. Because remember, he gave it out according to ability. And he compliments him, good and faithful servant. But then this other guy comes along, and he says, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours. Now, there's a lot of opinions on, this guy says this, right? I knew that you were basically mean, and I was afraid, and so I was afraid, so I didn't do anything. I just stuck it in the ground and hid it. Now you can have it back. I'm good, right? We're good, right? Is he talking about God? Is that the way God is? Is God, does God reap where he doesn't sow and gather where he scattered no seed? Is God, he was afraid and I went and hid, Does God want us to be afraid of him? Does he have a right view? And some people, when you read, they say, he had a wrong view of who his master was. And the other guys don't use that excuse, right? They don't come up with that excuse. They went and did, so he just had a wrong view. I kept coming back to this. It just kept sticking in my head, and I went and looked it up and wrote it down. Anybody ever read the Chronicles of Narnia? So in the book, The Chronicles of Narnia, Lucy is having this conversation with the beaver. And they're talking about Aslan. And in the books, Aslan represents Jesus or Christ. And Lucy says, well, is he safe? Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he is good. He's the king, I tell you. God has more attributes than we can possibly think or imagine. So maybe God does reap where he doesn't sow. He certainly can do that. maybe is harsh, but that's not what he calls us to do or be. We know that he's good. We know that he loves us. And just a little Bible thing here that I see a lot in people is they'll come to a verse that says something, you shouldn't do this. And then they'll point at that other person, you, and they say, well, he does that. He must not be a Christian. And I sit there and think, how many verses say it is by grace you are saved through faith and that not of yourself, or neither death nor life nor angels nor principalities can separate us from the love of God. But I'm going to say, well, because you did this thing, whatever that thing is, that may be wrong. He who has never done wrong, step up, right? So I just say that. But this guy has a wrong enough view of who his master is that he takes it and he buries it. Why? But why does he do that? What is the emotion he has that causes him to do that? What was that? Fear. He was afraid. And I often think also that if you think about fear, fear is a very powerful force in our lives. And nobody wants to ever admit, I'm afraid. I mean, how often do you have somebody say to you, well, I'm afraid, that's why I don't do that. I'm afraid that if I do that, I won't be able to do this, or whatever. I mean, it's a very powerful thing that we don't like to admit. But in the weird world, according to John, I notice that every time we sing that song, I'm no longer a slave to fear, we sing it really loud, really well. Because sometimes we let fear, all of us let fear rule. And this guy let fear rule, so much so that he didn't do what he was supposed to do. Because what was his fear of? His fear was that possibly he could lose the money. He could risk it and not get a return, and then he wouldn't even have that to give back to his master. So his master calls him wicked and slothful or lazy. And he chastises him. You ought to have at least given it to the banker, and then I would have got a little bit with my interest. For everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken. So he takes that talent and gives it to the other guy. Well, that don't sound fair either. Well, here's the thing. This is a worldly story, right, with a heavenly meaning. This is saying the way something could happen in the world. Jesus used real stories that people would understand and recognize. This is not the same as what he's asking us to do. So he's not saying to you, well, here's your 5 talents of silver. Now go on your own and make it 5 more, is he? He's not saying that. Because he's asking us to be faithful in a little thing. He will make it happen. Right? Is he not in charge of everything? Can he, if you go out, is he going to, if you ask for a loaf of bread, is he going to give you a stone? Especially if you're doing his will and his work and what he wants and what he has told you. The part of the video last week where LaDon says, I just love that line. Is LaDon here today? She's hiding still. She said, well, once I put it out there, it was sort of like having invitations to a party, and what if nobody ever shows up? Right? But when we give, it's a 2-party transaction. It's actually a 3. We think of it as a 1. Well, I'm going to go give this money to the mission fund, or I'm going to go give this money to French, and that, whatever. There's a giver, there's a receiver, and there's God. And we usually see the giver part, or sometimes we see the receiver part. But we need to challenge ourselves living in the richest by far country of the world, by hugely far. And you can hear all your stuff about this country. It's not true. The United States is by far the richest country in the entire world. And we can live here and think that it's not our job or whatever, but think, maybe that's why the Lord put us here now, to be the ones to give and fund his work and his will. Because God could have, in any way, he could have met that man's need in Sierra Leone, right? Anyway, I mean, somebody could just walk up and give it to him. He could have done that. Why did he do it the way he did it? Because he wanted us and LaDon and himself to see how we're all part of it. We're going to look at another video here in a minute from another person, totally different testimony, but the message is the same. That God calls us to use our resources, what he has entrusted us. I meant to say this early on, but I forgot. And this is a hard concept to grasp your head around. And I've spent 37 years trying to grasp it, and I still haven't grasped it. Nothing you have is yours. These guys don't have nothing. They only have what the master entrusted to them. And we only have what the Lord has entrusted to us. We think it's ours. I went to work. I worked for that. I deserve a break today. Right? So we're going to watch this video. So I don't know. Who you're going to see, if you don't know him, is Pastor Leonard Tanks. I don't know Leonard very well at all. What I do know is what I see what Leonard is doing. And Leonard continues to strengthen the biblical foundation. He has a mission mindset, definitely, because he could have just sat in comfort over here doing what he was doing, and he's not doing that. And he's faithfully using God's provision as God provides, but in a different world than we are. So I thought it would be good to hear from Leonard, just his perspective. And he throws in some thank yous and stuff, which really was not to ask, but he did it anyway, so ignore that part. Go ahead.
Hey, what's going on, friendship, man? I am so excited to be able to send you guys this virtual thank you, this virtual update. As you know, man, you guys have been, man, such a blessing to Reach City Church. If those are watching don't know who I am, I'm Leonard Tanks. I am the pastor of Reach City Church. Man, we are an urban church plant in the Ward 7 community of Cleveland. And, man, it is because of the generosity of you all over and over and over again that we have been able to do some amazing ministry, some amazing things that as a church plant we would otherwise be unresourced to accomplish. Kind of since we've met you guys from my days at Hope Alliance, you guys have always exemplified what it means to use kingdom resources for the advancement of the kingdom outside of just your context, outside of just your local context. And I believe that's biblical. I believe that is biblical. I'm reminded of Paul in Philippians thanking the church of Philippi for partnering with him in the area of financial resources as he embarked on his mission to advance the kingdom of God throughout the Gentile regions. I recall in Corinthians where Paul was gathering resources in Romans, when he was gathering resources for the church in Jerusalem, who was experiencing a time of drought, a time of need. And so he went around to other churches saying, hey, would you give to support the Church of Jerusalem? And as I think about that, all I can think about is that as the big C, the big church outside of our local context, God actually expects us to use our overflow, our resources to help other churches, to help other organizations who are advancing the kingdom in their context that may need some help in order to do it. Reach City Church, the Ward 7 community, 47% below the poverty line. This is a community. We are a church ministering in a place of drought, a place of much development coming, but still a place of very much a drought right now. And as a new church plant, we have called on you guys more than once, whether it was from a whole church standpoint or whether it was just an individual support, like the John Breers and the majors and others who have sent donations to our ministry to help with things like the blessing boxes. There are still members of your church who give monthly to make sure that we keep those blessing boxes stocked. And I am in awe over Christmas how we put a call out to help us be able to provide toys to the children of our community, man. And you guys showed up tremendously. And it wasn't like there was a lot of days notice. It was, man, are you able to help? And the way that you guys responded as a church, man, really blessed us, really left my wife and I just in awe. And not just of you guys, but just in awe of what God can do. I'm reminded of a friend told me, God has a lot of money and he can do with it as he so chooses. And him using you guys to be a conduit of resources to allow us to provide toys to over 300 kids within our community. In addition to that, over 30 individual families that we were able to bless, however many children were in their house with gifts. Being able to take 4 teenagers on a shopping spree because of donations that came from you all. And so I just want to thank you guys. I want to encourage you guys to never lose that, to continue to hold on to that generosity, continue to hold on to the way you guys steward the resources of the kingdom, not just to change the people in your congregation's lives, not just to change the community indirectly in the direct context with you guys, but also to continue to see where God is moving and God is working, and to be able to use your resources to be a blessing to those things. And so again, I thank you guys. You have truly been an amazing friendship, an amazing partnership, if I may say that. And I just encourage you guys to continue to do what you guys do. May God bless you from the Tanks household and from the Reach City Church. We thank you. We love you. Take care.
So we're going to close, but that says better. I don't know. It's not here though. I can't slide it. Anyways, you can preach and you can teach. But when I see last week and when I saw what Leonard said, I mean, here's the thing I want us to always be thinking. And again, I'm speaking to myself. Is what thing of this world, what car or this thing or that thing is going to be better than that? And what car, which I've owned a lot of cars, and they're always nice when you get them, and they're always junk when I get rid of them. This is eternal. It's forever. And people's lives are changed forever if we can but be faithful to where God has us. So I want to close just with a few things that using God's provision does extend beyond money. It could be connections. In LaDon's thing, she didn't have the money to give to that person, but she knew how to go about it, and she had LaDon. I'm going to give you a testimony. She's going to hate this. So if she's not watching, don't tell her I said this. I know LaDon pretty well. And I'm on Facebook a lot. Some of you know that. And when I saw LaDon post that, I was like, wow, this is LaDon. LaDon never on her worst day would do what she did. She would never want to do that. Start a GoFundMe for some guy in Africa who we don't know. She just wouldn't do that. And I'm sitting there thinking, if LaDon did that, then I believe the story. He doesn't even have, if she knows him and she knows the story, then I know it's real. And so she leveraged her good name, her integrity, and who she was to get $4,000 for this man who's now praising the Lord on the other side of the world, that he doesn't understand how people who he never met and never will met, but he'll welcome us into heaven, those of us, you see what I'm saying? That's what it's all about. But it goes beyond money, so think about that. It could be your home, it could be giving people rides, I don't know what. Personally, we need to think about this corporately as a whole church, as Tank said, the Big C church, as well as the little church and at FAC. We take very seriously, the elder board, the governing board, the funds that you guys give us every week when you give us money. We don't just, we got the money, we'll go do that. Things that are outside the budget are very much discussed and drilled down on, and we take it because that's part of it. Using this church building for trail life and Bible studies, community events, we're trying to leverage our building beyond just church things. That's what we're trying to do. Leverage our property for soccer camps, things like that. And we haven't done as well at it as we would like. And sometimes we think, well, gosh, if we let all those trail life dudes come in here and tear up the fellowship hall, we're going to have to call somebody and fix the dents, right? Maybe if we just didn't let them use the fellowship hall, we wouldn't have to fix those. That's not faithfully using God's provision. Faithfully, remember? Faithfully. So I picked on Trail Life, so I didn't pick on the youth group. All right. So that's what we do. That's what Friendship Alliance is about. It's about trying to reach the world by strengthening families through Jesus Christ. And the guideposts of that are build the biblical foundation, strengthen it, have a mission mindset for all of us in our day-to-day lives, and then to faithfully use what God has provided to us towards those ends. Amen.